Hello, and welcome to Pest in Class, Expert Voices in Pest Management. Today, we spoke with Daniel Shropshire, the Director of Operations at Official Pest Prevention in Northern California. We discussed his journey into the industry, how FieldDrowse has enabled them to dedicate more time to delivering high-quality customer service, and how Daniel and his team are shaping the future of pest, one school at a time. I'm your host, Amanda Salvatore. Let's get into it. Daniel Shropshire, you are the Director of Operations at Official Pest Prevention here in California. And today we will be discussing your journey within the company and the challenges and strategies you have utilized as you navigate through Official's growth. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us today. We always start with a little icebreaker, and this one is pretty exceptional, and I'm very excited to hear your answer. You were a radio DJ for a little while. D. Shrop was your name before you went into the pest industry. So what are your 3 go-to songs that help get a party started?
I always try to think of the beginning, the middle, and the end of how you want the party to go. Going through that process at that time, we're talking about early 2000s. I graduated high school in 2003. Around that time, I said to get the party started, Flow Rider, Low was the way to get it going. And I always have a bad habit, and it's not a bad habit. I think it's a great habit. I love Earth, Wind, and Fire. And Reasons was like the song I'd always put in the jukebox when I would show up to the watering hole or wherever it was. I went with my wife when we were younger, before kids. And I always put that on. People never understood why. I said, because that's such an awesome song. And then, like I said, by that time, the end of the party, you're getting ready to close down. Then you put on Friends in Low Places by Garth Brooks. And that's kind of like the progress. I mean, any wedding, any awesome party you've been to, that's like the start, the middle, the end. After that, it's on everybody else to figure out what music they want.
I think that is so much fun. You've hit all these different genres, and I love ending an evening with a sing-along.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
Friends in Low Places is an excellent choice for that. I could talk about music literally all day long, but we got to talk pest. So I know you started in the pest industry with Official in 2007. You started as a technician. So what has been your journey from tech to Director of Operations?
I got married in 2006, and my brother-in-law was in pest control. I was in school for wanting to be on the radio, doing webcasts and certain things like that, drama. And then I had to get a job because school bills add up. So I started working in manufacturing, and then I met my wife, and that kind of changed our plans in what I wanted to do. And her brother was in pest control at Official Pest Prevention and got me an interview. And I said, okay, well, this is a real job. At that time, I used quotes because it was, at that point, it was a job. It wasn't a career. And then from there, I was trying to be better than the last person that used to do the route that I did. I really liked engaging with customers because I really like a good back and forth with individuals. So it started kind of in that aspect of just really customer service. When I had problems on the pest control side, I'd call my trainer and say, hey, I need help on remembering how to mix this product or how to treat this. Pest control, to me, was very cookie cutter back then, especially in California. A lot of customers or companies were focused on regular reoccurring service and didn't really have the science behind it. And then it changed. And so then I started learning the back end of pest control to make it to where I really wanted these customers to be happy. So how did I develop their happiness? And it was one, the customer service side, but then I needed to follow that up with actual quality service. So it really came down to, okay, now I need to solve the problem that they have. I think my smile and my attempt at humor is only going to go so far. I need to actually solve their problems. I brought this, let's see if this get on camera. This is me.
Look at you.
Yes.
Oh my God. So it's a young Daniel. He is holding a cage.
Possum.
You're holding a possum in a cage, and it's framed, it's poster sized, it's incredible.
It's only because I had to find every once in a while, somebody in the office would say, how long have you been here? And I'd go, 17, almost 18 years. And they'd say, oh, okay. And I said, yeah, I started off as a tech, and nobody would ever really believe that I started off as a tech. And a lot of our old ads, like Facebook ads and stuff like that, would have some old pictures of me. And so somebody randomly came across and it got framed. because nobody believes that's me. And I said, no, it's me. It was just like 20 years ago, me. No, not 20 years ago. So it's probably 15 years ago, me. It's one of those things I like to see it as a reminder. It's like, okay, I actually was a technician. And that's where I started. And like I said, it kind of moved from being a good tech. Then I wasn't really big into sales, but it just came natural. So when I was talking to customers, we didn't have a lot of stuff to upsell at that time. There wasn't a lot of different bundled services. Like I said, it was very cookie cutter. But then it turned into, we had a competition. The owner at the time, he had awarded somebody with an iPad 3 for being at the company for 10 years. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was probably 5-6 years at the time. He pulled out another iPad 3 and said, okay, the next person to get 8 sales as a technician will win this iPad 3. So I was like, well, I'm going to get that iPad 3. I started going on Craigslist and different things because I didn't want to do the door-to-door route. So I started going the online route. And this is really before there was the online option. You know, Home Advisor was just coming out. Angie's List was just kind of breaking through. But Craigslist was kind of the way to go at that point for somebody that wasn't savvy in the pay-per-click or any of those type of features. And so it worked out really well. I sold a lot of pest control as a technician, doing really well. And so I really got into the sales, gave me opportunities to get into commercial sales. We would have this company that would do outbound calls to companies. So I got to go to different businesses. I'd run a route as a technician, do 8 hours in that day. And then at that, I would pick up random inspections for commercial accounts to try to get those bigger fish. It was really entertaining and it was fun. It reminded me of just that back and forth with the customer. But now I'm meeting new people, new personalities. And that's kind of how it started. I did that till 2014. And then 2014, I got an opportunity to come in as a supervisor. We acquired a company called Tower Pest Control in Fresno. And once we did that acquisition, they had offered me to go down to Fresno to take up kind of a service manager role. I had my son recently before that. And then my wife was pregnant with my daughter and we had our house. And so I didn't take the opportunity at that point, which I'm glad because it gave me the opportunity to go into a route manager role closer to home. That was probably one of the best decisions I did in my life because then it turned into an opportunity to learn. Our office manager, customer service manager at that time left. So I got to be a route manager, then a customer service manager, taking retention calls, doing the routing. And like I said, the routing is like one of my favorite things to do. So that was really natural and fun for me. As the company grew, it turned into an actual branch manager role. We didn't have a branch manager role at that time. So then it turned into that. And then 2021 came around and Anticimex came along and my world turned upside down, but for the even better than what I thought. It's kind of like one of those transitions where you work for so long for a company. And then the moment I think that most employees of a family-owned business is the fear of what happens if they sell. And we were buying companies at the time. We had a couple smaller acquisitions. We had Tower in Fresno that went from a 4-route company to like a 16-route company. Our branch, basically. We were at 16 routes in 2004. We went up to, I want to say at the time, 40 different routes throughout Stockton, all the way up to majority of Sacramento, a little bit of Bay Area. So it grew really fast. And then, like I said, Anticimex came along and we had that conversation with the owners. And that was my biggest fear at the time as a supervisor. And the world was totally different after that day, but for the better. So we're excited.
I'm so glad that you found your footing. I know that Official has grown from this small operation. We're just talking about this small operation, and now all of a sudden you're covering Northern California, which is huge. How have you maintained this small business feel during such an incredible expansion?
That's a really good question. And to be honest with you, we're living in a post-COVID world. And thankfully, when we were growing the most we were growing even before COVID, and look, COVID was such an unfortunate situation to happen to anybody. It was very dramatic on a lot of people's lives. It changed, I think, the work dynamic for a lot of businesses in the industry. Thankfully, pest control in California was considered one of those industries that could continue to work. We made off better than a lot of people did. And thankfully, I think we're seeing most people came out of it okay financially. It was a very big year for pest control in 2020, but we had already been working on kind of having to deal with a certain amount of percentage of growth. And we realized it was very hard to get into some of the areas that we wanted to continue to grow in without having technicians that actually lived in the area. So we were kind of doing the work from home, but on a technician level. We had stopped making technicians come into the office every day. We did weekly checkouts with technicians so they could go home more often, spend more time with their family. We did daily checkouts just over the phone. And that made it easier for them to get to their customers every day. And then what we would relay to the customers, because it's not easy when you hear, I want to deal with somebody more local. I go, well, I don't disagree with you, but all of our technicians live in the areas that they service. They know the problems. They know the customers, especially if they've been on their route for a long time. We're looking at, long-term consistency in the routes. And the fact that they lived in the areas that they serviced gave them a big leg up. They got to be a part of certain events and promote official pest prevention to their own specific events, their own walkathons, their own school events, or whatever it may be. I know I did a couple of trunk or treats just in my area where I lived because I wanted more people to recognize that we were in a more rural area. But that was probably the biggest thing that has helped official kind of, as we grown, keep the small company, the small business feel. And it's worked out pretty good. Like I said, our technicians are very engaged in their communities and they love working with their customers.
Sounds like everything is locally sourced in its own way and that you are keeping it really within the community. I know you mentioned this idea of check-ins. We talked about events, keeping people local and being a part of their community. I know you're managing this large operation. You have multiple branches. How do you feel like you are able to create consistency in customer service and quality? And how has Field Routes helped aid in that?
The nice thing that we look at is we kind of have this mentality, and this is one of the things that's happened since Anticimex. We've used Field Routes for a long time. So the back end, the back office, the routing, all the things that I started dealing with as a service manager or route manager back in 2016 when we first started with Field Routes, back then it was called Pest Routes, was really that trying to dive in and learn everything to make the job easier for the next person. So a lot of the black eyes and skin knees I received mainly because I was curious on how to use the system to the most of its ability. How do we learn how to make customer service team and some of the processes that they were doing? How can we use Field Routes to actually make it less of a struggle to get those things accomplished? Routing has probably been one of our biggest things that we've worked on efficiencies. We like to still have, even though there's a ton of options on Field Routes, to do options for routing that doesn't involve human participation as much. We still try to keep that human aspect because we do want to look at every day and say, are we optimized the most that we can be? And is there something that we can still do even to the last minute before reminders go out? Reminders used to be like a 30, 45-minute process. Now it's a click of a button, right? So that's a small example of just ways it's made us more efficient. But really, as we've grown, we have 4 different branches now over Northern California. And we did not have that before 2021. That was something that came fairly new in 2022, really 2023 as we grew. And especially with the kind of Anticimex models, the branch managers, the hero, Field Routes has really made it to where what we've learned in the last 8 years of using it has made it so they don't have to relearn all that stuff. They can use that all to their benefit and they really can focus on, okay, I don't need to look at the routing. I just need to make sure, are my technicians on the right route? Is Steve on the route that has Mrs. Thomas on it? Because Mrs. Thomas only likes Steve. It's one of those things that they can be really fine tune on the expectations of the customer because they don't have to worry about all that back end stuff. The reminder calls, the optimizing routes, just building routes for the next couple months and making sure that the same text, it's really been simplified. So it's not so hands-on on the things that we don't need to be hands-on, but more hands-on on the things that honor the consistency promise that you're asking about.
Yeah, I love this idea of automating and getting certain things out of the way that would normally take up time, but using that extra time that you now have to really be able to create an experience for your customers and really put that cherry on top.
I think a lot of times companies look at ways to optimize their process for certain reasons. I don't want to say what those reasons might be because everybody goes, oh, they optimized, they brought in technology, they bring in AI, and now it makes it to where I don't have a job. No, that just means that where the human aspect comes in to help on. No computer is going to sit there and convince a customer on why we're the better service. No AI is going to convince somebody about what's the best for their family and if they've got pets and what the products that should be used for that. Right now, that's not something I need to spend more time on that with the people that are working, that are humans, and give that human aspect, right? Empathy in regards to problems that we've all dealt with. And Field Routes has given us the time to be able to focus more on some of those things. I'll bring up COVID again. When that was going on, there was a huge concern that what if we can't help them through this time? What if money is an issue? What if, somebody's in the military and they have to relocate? Where do we put the human aspect to turn around and help them the best as possible? That has been more beneficial to us lately to be able to do that with all the different things that we've been able to do on the back end with Field Routes.
Daniel, that's the quote of the episode. You just did it. We can close our laptops and call it a day. That you summarized that beautifully. It gives you the opportunity to really dive into that customer service and keep that small town feel that we were talking about earlier. I think that's incredible. And I'm glad that there are services out there that really help aid businesses to be efficient so they can focus on the customer.
Yeah. I mean, it's just to make us better. Like when you see all these ads that come in offering you this and this, I'm like, what's really going to make my life better? What's going to make the job experience for my employee better? What's going to make the experience for my customer? Now they have a customer portal, but is it so difficult that they can't even understand how to use it? Is it so difficult that my employee can't even explain to them how to use it? That's not the case. And so that's been very beneficial for us. It's very simple, but in a good way. I don't want to spend too much time looking at my customer portal and figuring out how to make a payment. I just want to make a payment,
Let me give you money.
Yes, please.
I know that you have been using and implementing Field Routes bundling services feature for about 4 months now. I know you're still navigating through it, but can you tell me about what is getting you excited about this feature?
What's really getting us excited is the fact that we really see bundling as an option for our customers with all the different types of options that have grown. What I was saying earlier, what used to be just a cookie cutter system for customers. Now it's not just spiders. Now it's mosquitoes. We've grown into really big into termite and exclusion and different warranties and packages. So we're really diving into the bundled services, which we're excited about because a lot of our other platforms do bundled type services. And we've seen a lot of success. And what we have noticed is struggles when we've had bundled services in the past before it was an option. You'd have to kind of find those bundled services and then grab one and then grab the other one and put them together. Now they're automatically getting bundled together during their due service time or service due date. And that's been really beneficial because that's what we want it to do. That's what we want the customer to not go, hey, why did I have mosquito service this week? And then I had my regular service for GPC next week. Why didn't you just do it in the same day? And I go, that's a good question. Why didn't we do that? So I don't disagree, but now it's doing that and it's been super beneficial.
I'm so glad to hear that. I can't wait to connect and hear how it's going once you are really settled into it.
Like I said, all you got to do is invite me back. So.
Excellent. We'll have to do it. So I want to discuss a little bit about your philosophy. We're talking about sales here, right? We're bundling these services together. We're really customizing it for the customer. And I know that you have a philosophy when you are referring to your technicians. You think of them more as advocates for the customer rather than a salesman. Can you go into that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I try to think back of when I was a technician, and I remember customers would ask me about, hey, what do you recommend I could do? And at that point, it was so early on that I just, it's such a bigger world now in pest control options. But I always remembered every decision I made or every offer or everything I did, even down to like a new person talking to me over a sales call. I really just tried to make sure they understand, hey, I'm a technician, a husband, I'm a father, and I'm trying to solve a problem when I call somebody. So really, I just want the best for you. What's the best for your situation? It's not trying to throw something down at somebody to get them to sign. It's, hey, what are your needs, right? I'm not going to sell you something specifically because I want to sell this many numbers of this specific product. I really want to sell you something that's going to help you, be a benefit to your family, and then at the same time, really make it to where you understand that this is the long-term solution for you on this specific problem. Now, later on, if you say, hey, I really like that, now I want to look at the exclusion part. I want to look at smart digital monitoring for rodents instead of just baiting or whatever it may be. I want to give those recommendations. So technicians really have a solid foot in the door, I guess is what I would say, when it comes to giving opportunities to customers about what they need. And a lot of times with sales, I think sometimes people get frustrated when technicians are too honest and say, you don't need that. You don't need to spend that much. And a sales manager would be like, oh, no, don't say that. Don't say that, right? But that's what keeps the honesty, right? That's what keeps customer brand loyalty, is really when somebody's just honest with you. And technicians have the opportunity to do that. So if we're at a house and we notice something that maybe even the technician's not qualified to inspect for, and he just noticed something that I would make a recommendation to call our office. That's what I would want for my house and my biggest investment. So then they call him, they say, okay, I got recommended to get a termite inspection. Then the person that's qualified to do the inspection does it. And then they find out, hey, it was no big deal. There's no problems. Thank you for making sure that I got that covered. Or I found out that there was subterranean termites and I didn't know this, and I would not have known this if you wouldn't have told me. That advocacy is really important because it's not really about sales. It's about really just keeping the relationship strength between the customer and the technician.
Yeah, I love this idea of transparency and really just having an honest conversation with the customer about what they need. And I think customers respond to that honesty and that compassion and someone who is genuinely trying to solve your problem. I know that you mentioned while you were just speaking about this digital monitoring.
Smart.
And yes, smart. I'm so excited to talk to you about this. And I think it's really, especially in California, I would love to hear how you are changing this pest industry one school at a time.
We've had a relationship with a school district in Northern California, Sacramento area specifically. I don't want to give away their name because I don't know if they'd be okay with that, but we worked with them for about 15 years. And they're about, I want to say 25 to 30 school sites that we have done, just a regular pest control service before we even had the opportunity to talk to them about Smart. And because of that close relationship, we worked with another individual that moved to a different school district, and we had just got acquired by Anticimex, and the Smart was the first thing that we learned was this rodent monitoring, digital 24/7, 365 monitoring. The office here or the technician can know about activity before the customer even knows about it, right? I bought in on the idea. I said, oh man, with everything going on in California, we just had second generation baits get banned. So we got rid of contract. We went into Solantra. And then all of a sudden we're looking at first generation banned baits. And then we're even hearing about glue board bans and different things like that. I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we going to use to solve some of these problems? And so it's kind of like the perfect timing for us to get involved with Anticimex to see there is another option. And it's a pretty successful option. For us, it's been really successful. And really for the school districts that we've worked with has been really successful. So we got, an opportunity to present it to that school district that worked with us for quite a number of years. Then it kind of went cold. We didn't hear anything for a while. And then we found out that one of those individuals who had left that I had worked with for the last 10 years, myself personally, to another school district was over double the size of that school district. And they said, rodents are our biggest concern. We want to make sure that there's really a way for us to not have to be so invested on making sure, teachers find the problem or students find the problem before it gets out of hand. And we gave them that option. We showed them the products, the multi-catch box for kitchens and cafeteria areas and common areas, a PeerSense to be able to detect movement and different temperatures and stuff like that. And it's been super successful. I like smart schools because I just go smart, and then schools, it just makes sense. But then at the same time, I don't want to take away from the schools about what they do for education. So we kind of, thought about like sustainable schools, right? What do we do to help the schools kind of combat their problems, but at the same time, get in line with what California is moving towards. And California is, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because there's a lot of good things that Bates can do. And the more and more we restrict them, it makes it harder and harder for us to solve not small problems, it's really the big problems in school districts and school sites and different things like that. It's harder to solve those problems, but SMART has really come in and been successful. And since then, we're on our second year now with this school district that's a complete SMART school, over 54 sites, high schools, middle schools, elementary schools, continued education, all that. We have set up another school district that's really close to that area for SMART. And now I just got to convince the original school district we've had for the last 15 years, hey, everybody's got the best product out there. Why aren't you jumping on? And they said, okay, well, I'll meet you next week. I said, perfect.
There you go. You send them this podcast.
I will do that.
You'll be like, Amanda Salvatore is very interested in this program.
She told me like her kid draws on paper all the time in her office. And one of the things he drew was a rat because his school doesn't have SMART.
Yeah. We gotta change that. We gotta change something. It.
Perfect.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're doing such incredible work with it. And it sounds like it's being really successful, which is great to hear.
Thank you.
Finally, I want to know, as someone who has seen Official through major transitions, what advice would you give to others in leadership roles during times of organizational change? I know it worked out for you, but you said you were nervous about it originally, as many people are. So what would your advice be to them?
It's hard to speak for everybody because my experience might be a lot different than somebody else that went through an organizational change through a different acquisition type situation. We really lucked out with Anticimex through this process because they chose Official to be the platform for Northern California. And that doesn't happen with a lot of acquisitions. So of course, I was hesitant at first in regards to what was going to happen, a lot of question marks. And I think that's just natural for anybody, any leader. But to be honest with you, we didn't have a lot of leaders. When we had a small family-owned business outside of the owners, there was really just a core couple of different people, myself, Calvin, and Calvin's probably the only other guy that's worked here longer than me, but we've worked together for a long time. And what I have seen is, and what I would tell anybody is, when you go through these processes, patience is probably the biggest thing. When change happens, change can be very good for you if you are not closed-minded. So patience first, and then be open-minded to the opportunities, because I think a lot of times people think of change as being a bad thing, and it's not always a bad thing. In some cases, it could be a very good thing. In fact, for us, it's a very good thing because I was a branch manager before our organizational change, and now I'm a director of operations. And who knows what the next step for me is. But then me leaving has also, from being a branch manager, has given 4 other supervisors to be branch managers, right? So you've got to fill those positions. And a lot of these positions are being filled by people who've worked for the company that really bleed Official, right? Official Pest Prevention is just like me. And so I get to be excited to see them take those opportunities. And so far, the more and more I've seen is we've got more supervisor management positions when it comes to sales, when it's come to the customer service, when it's termite and specialty services, inspectors. It's been a blessing for a lot of people here. And so, like I said, original question, patience, and keep an open mind. Incredible.
Daniel, thank you so much for coming on to Pest in Class today.
No problem. I appreciate it. Thank you. Like I said, this is fun for me.
I'm glad. I had fun too.